never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with Mr. Willard Veenstra of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now Bill, can you start us off with some background on yourself?
Well, I was born December 16th, 1925, the youngest of 10 children, and I'm the sole survivor of, I think, of my whole generation, actually.
Mm-hmm. Practically.
And my father was in the painting and decorating business, houses, and he learned that, I think, in the Netherlands. That's where he was born.
Okay.
And then all of our brothers were involved in that too as we grew up. But
okay. Now you're growing up in the Depression. I mean, did your dad have regular work, or was it on and off?
Yeah, he was hooked up with some organization that was repossessing houses, I think. I don't know for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but they would then fix some houses up, and he would bid on jobs and get them to do the painting and decorating that needed to be done.
Okay. Now, with 10 kids, did your mother just stay home?
Oh yeah. She wasn't in the best of health as I knew her, because being the youngest one, she was like an old lady to me.
Mm-hmm.
She died when I was 15. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, I didn't really like painting and decorating, and then I did that while I was still at home before I got in the Army or anything. But then I graduated from Union High School on June 15th of 1944. About 5 days later, I was in that Army base in Illinois getting sworn into the Army.
Okay. So you would have gotten a draft notice a little bit earlier than that, though?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I probably got that while I was still in high school.
Right. But they would normally let people finish high school first and then go in.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, to back up a little bit, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
On Pearl Harbor, that was on a Sunday. And, of course, we went to church all the time. We were members there. And I was over at a friend of mine's house after dinner at noon. And we were looking at the funny papers. And I guess they had the radio on, and it came on the radio that the Japanese had attacked and raised a lot of cane in Pearl Harbor. That's how I heard about it then.
All right. Now, at that point, did you figure you were too young to have to worry about any of that?
Well, yes, I never give that a thought that I would end up in it.
Okay.
But,
now, did you have older brothers who went in?
Yeah, my youngest brother, who's 4 years older than me, he went in it. He was in anti-aircraft artillery, and he went to officers training school, and came out of there as second lieutenant, and eventually he was a lieutenant colonel, was his permanent
His rank. Yeah.
rank.
Okay. So how long did he stay in the Army?
Well, he got out right after the war ended and was in the reserves.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the Korean War started, he got called back in. And he ended up as in military government in Germany, in the city of Hamburg, and he was there quite a while then.
Okay. That would explain how he got all the way to lieutenant colonel, because usually
well, I think while he was there, he was a full colonel as a kind of a temporary
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Yeah.
But then he, after quite a while after I was married, he got cancer, esophagus cancer, and I think that's what killed him. And he is buried in Arlington Cemetery, and
Okay.
so is his wife.
All right. Now, was he your only brother who went in the service during the
Well,
war?
I had a brother, another brother, Bob. He's about 11 years older than me, and he was in the Navy. And they were giving him some kind of training with a lot of electrical wires with colors and stuff, and they found out he was colorblind, so they turned him into a cook. So he was a cook all while he was in the Navy.
All right.
And none of my other brothers were in, a couple brother-in-laws that were. And
All right. Now, as the war goes on and you're getting older and getting to be a military age, did you consider enlisting, or did you figure you would just wait for them to catch up
I
with
just
you?
wait for them to catch up to me.
All right. And they did that right away. Okay. Now, so where did you report to first?
To a place in Illinois.
So Fort Sheridan?
Fort Sheridan, yes.
Okay. And how did
It's
you...
only that was, I guess, the big thing they did to us there was taught us how to salute and trade our civilian clothes for Army clothes, and then they sent us back home for a weekend so we could take all our civilian stuff back home. Then back to Fort Sheridan again until they sent us down to, got my basic training in Camp Landing, Florida.
And what part of Florida is that in?
That was, it would be west of, what's that old city on the east coast there? I can never think of the name of it.
Well, there's...
But we were in central from that, near Ocala.
Okay. That
And
works. All right. So you're in Central Florida. All right. And what did they actually have you do when you got down there?
Well, they just started training us all kinds of stuff. But that was a period of, so I got there sometime in July. And then, of course, it was just basic training to teach you how to be a soldier and how to,
Okay. Well, how much of it was physical training?
well, most of it, we had a lot of physical therapy. Well, you don't call it,
Yeah.
that's something different. Physical exercises and marching and just getting you in shape for what was coming about. And then went to rifle ranges to learn how to shoot with a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And we trained with anti-tank guns, and I'm glad we never saw them in Europe because they weren't a very good tool. But
Well, were they
Yeah.
37 millimeter anti-tank?
the
guns?
37
Yeah.
was one of them, and the other one was a 57.
Yeah.
So when I saw them German tanks, well, I decided they wouldn't do much.
Right.
Because even our tanks, shells would kind of bounce off of them. Panzers and 88s.
Right.
But in our basic training too, we would go out to march out to the rifle range in the morning, and it was hot in Florida at that time. And on the way back from the range, they'd have an ambulance following us if anybody caved in from heat exhaustion or whatever. And
Okay.
a few
Now,
guys did. But
were the men you were training with there in Florida, were they all about your age, or were there some older guys?
well, there was my age and older ones, yeah.
And did you learn anything about where they came from or anything else about them?
Not really. Come from all over, it seemed like.
Okay.
Some of them did go from the Grand Rapids area at the same time I did, but the one that was kind of a friend of mine, we thought we'd be going to the same place, but they broke up our train that was on the way in. Our train went to Florida, and that other one went someplace else, so I never did hear from him again.
All right. Now, how much emphasis did they put on discipline?
Well, strict.
Okay.
You do what they say and don't argue, of course. But
Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to that kind of life?
well, it wasn't really difficult, though. You know, it was just change, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any problems with it.
Okay.
Of course, we complained forever, but about and food and so forth.
All right. Now, what happened? I mean, if somebody messed up or didn't follow orders down there, what happened to them?
I don't know. We never had that problem.
Okay. All right. And now, how long did you spend in basic training?
Well, we got there, like I say, in July, and I left there. The basic training was over with, and a lot of the people left before I did because I was held over for some dental work, as it says in there.
It held you over for dental work?
Yeah.
Okay.
And anyway, we got that out, and then I was sent home. Well, went on a leave
Right.
on my way to Fort Meade.
Okay.
And I stopped over in Detroit and then home for, well, I don't know if that was for a 30-day leave or what it was, but
Okay. So then, kind of early November, you go to Fort Meade, Maryland next?
yes.
Okay, and what did you do there?
That was supposed to be some more training on those anti-tank guns, but I don't think we saw one of them there at all. I don't know what all we did there, to tell you the truth. We got outfitted with winter clothing, and because we just up until that time had summer clothing, heavy overcoats and boots and whatever we needed.
Now, when you got the winter clothing, did you figure you must be going to Europe?
Well, I kind of assumed that because it was in Fort Meade rather than going west from
Right.
Illinois.
Okay. And then, when do you actually ship out?
Well, they sent us up to some camp north of New York City, and that was kind of a preparation thing there. I don't even remember how long we were there, not very long. And then we boarded the ship in New York Harbor. Spent Christmas somewhere along the line there. I don't know just how that timeline was there. But then we left New York Harbor and sailed across the ocean, and I don't remember how long that took
Okay.
either.
Now, what kind of ship was it that you were on?
It was a British ship, I don't know, or a Dutch ship. I don't know just what kind it was. It wasn't like a Liberty ship,
Okay.
but there was a whole bunch of people on it.
Okay.
And
Now, at this point, are you just going over as a replacement? You're going to join whatever unit needs people?
yeah, wherever they sent you when you got there.
Okay.
We weren't part of a organized group at all,
Right.
just replacements.
Okay. And now, what was the weather like on the crossing?
Well, it wasn't too bad until we got into a pretty good storm, and a lot of the guys got seasick, especially on the Liberty ships where they were really back and forth and up and down in the water, and the propellers would come right out of the water.
So your ship was bigger than that?
Yes, I think so. It seemed to be more stable.
All right.
I remember that thing getting that rocky, but I didn't get sick, so I was
Okay.
fortunate there.
Now, did you have any trick to avoid getting sick?
Well, I don't know if I did or didn't, but I didn't like the food they had, so some of us survived on Hershey bars and some kind of a cookie. Didn't eat much on that whole
Right.
trip
There's not
across.
much to come back up. All right. And do you have a sense about how long the trip took?
Oh, it must have been over a week.
Okay. Now, were you sailing in a convoy?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know how many ships or anything were in that convoy, but
Okay. And did you have any U-boat scares while you were crossing?
no, not that we're aware of.
Okay.
But our ship landed in France, and the place where I was going was to the 2nd Armored Division. Of course, I didn't know that. And they were down there towards the end of the Battle of the Bulge trying to help finish that up. And I can't remember much of that because I wasn't there very long.
Right. Now, when you landed in France, did you land at Le Havre or Cherbourg or someplace else?
I don't really know where it was.
Okay. Now, when you
I
got
think it was Le Havre.
that's likely at that point,
Yeah.
because that would have been closest to where you were going. And when you got off the ship, what did they do with you?
It was the only thing I can remember is getting on trucks and heading south down through Belgium into the Battle of the Bulge area, Bastogne and down in
Okay.
there. And
Now, were these just just sort of open trucks, or were they canvas covers, or?
I don't really remember what
Okay.
they were, because it seems might have been at night when we went down there.
Mm-hmm.
But see, the Battle of the Bulge started on my birthday, and it ended sometime in January
Yeah.
of 1945.
Right. And
So
you,
from there, then we went back up to the Second Armored had been called down from the Netherlands, where they were in kind of an R&R situation,
Mhm.
and went down there to help in that. And we went back up to where they were, and we were in there, up there, sometime in January or February, and had various training exercises there.
Okay. Now, what unit did you join once you got up there?
Oh, I was in the 41st Armored Infantry Regiment,
Mm-hmm.
and that was regular infantry regiment, except they called it armored because of we traveled in half tracks
Right.
rather than trucks or just walking.
Okay. Now, what kind of reception did you get when you joined the unit? You got a squad that you joined and a platoon. Did anybody show you around or explain anything, or?
Well, it couldn't do much explaining because they were still monkeying around down there in the Battle of the Bulge
Mhm.
area, so we just kind of absorbed you and watched for you. Of course, I was probably the youngest person in my company, because
Mhm.
I don't remember any other recruits coming in at that time.
Okay. So the other men that you're in your squad or your platoon, they've been there for a while already.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, they took good care of me.
Okay. So when you first joined them, are you sleeping out in the field, or?
Let's see, down there, I don't remember just what I did down there, because we weren't there.
Right.
I wasn't there very long. We went back to the Netherlands,
Mhm.
and we were in some people's homes there sleeping. And
Now, when you, okay, so really you have, it's a little bit of a blur there, the very, very beginning part, because you're moving around and the
Yes,
unit is still
yes,
doing stuff.
yes.
But then you go back up to the Netherlands and you stay there for a while?
yes,
Okay. And you said you're staying in people's homes. Now, did the people who owned the homes, were they still there?
oh yes, the people were there, and they told us not to eat their food or have them do our dishes,
Okay.
because if you did, it kind of affect your bowels.
Mm-hmm.
So we had mess kits and had a good mess up there, and we had hot food all the time. So.
Okay. Now,
And we had some training there various times, and they got some new tanks while we were up there, and so they brought a couple of them in there in that town to let us know what they looked like, and
Yeah.
not confuse them with the German tanks, because
Yeah.
there was some similarity at that time.
Well, were these tanks that had longer barreled guns, so they look more like the German ones? Or?
Yeah, they had a longer. They were more efficient than the ones they had originally.
Right. Okay. Now, did you get to talk or communicate at all with the Dutch people you were staying among?
Oh yeah, they could speak English pretty good in that family. Yeah.
Okay. And did they tell you much about what life had been like while the Germans were there?
No, we didn't really get into that at all, because we were kept busy on our own,
Right.
and we had our separate area in their house. Well, that was kind of like a enclave, or it seemed like it was walled all the way around it,
Mm-hmm.
and their apartments were into those outside walls, and we were,
Okay.
anything we did that didn't take us out of there, we did inside that area,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where we had our mess and stuff too. So.
Now, was this like a farm setup, or was it a town?
No, it was in a city.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it.
Now, was it close to the German border?
Yes, we could see the Siegfried line from where we were.
All right. And was there much activity while you were there? I mean, did the Germans do anything? Or
No, I've never heard a thing,
Okay.
because I think they had kind of pulled out of there, because when we left, we didn't get into any activity for quite a while, really not until we got way up the Elbe River. But when we did leave, we had to cross a couple of rivers, and they built pontoon boats so that we could get the tanks and the
Mm-hmm.
half-tracks across there and all the rest of the equipment, the artillery. And that was, I think, sometime in end of February, 1st of March,
Mhm.
perhaps. And then
Yeah. Because there's a big offensive across the Rhine in March, and so that's.
that's probably when
Yep.
it was in the first part of March.
Mhm.
Then we just kept going, and we'd come through some of these towns, and they would have to get bulldozers to clear paths for us because the towns were just all just blown apart. I've never seen such from bombing
Right.
and whatever the Germans had done. Of course, we went right into Germany from the Netherlands.
All right.
So then we were on the road there for, well, 1st of March, we got to where we were going, to the Elbe River, Magdeburg, Germany.
Okay. Well, that's going to be more like April by the time you get that far.
Well, that
Because you have to get
yeah,
across
that was
Germany.
11th of April when we got to
Yeah.
Magdeburg.
So you're spending probably a few weeks moving across northern
Well, we
Germany.
ran into some opposition. We took that one town, and there was a bunch of snipers in there. And we were going to stay in that town overnight, and snipers kept shooting. And they told the people of the town, "You can get rid of the snipers, or we're going to pull out and just blow the town all up." So that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't. Of course, they couldn't get rid of the snipers. So we pulled out and went back up in the hills, and then they opened up with the artillery, and that was that. So then we went on from there again, and we were told on one Saturday night, the 31st of March, we're going to take a town on Sunday, and there's going to be absolutely no resistance whatsoever. And we all thought, yeah, sure, that's April Fool's Day. But we went through that town and nothing happened there, so then that was the 1st of April. Then we just kept on going, and
Okay.
like I said, we'd go down side roads and to a certain length, and if there was no resistance, we'd turn back and go back to the main columns. And
Okay. Now, would you sometimes encounter resistance?
the only resistance that we met any of that time on that drive was actually in Magdeburg, and so maybe some of the other little bit of towns where we were clearing them out, and a couple guys got slight injuries.
Okay. But you don't really have much recollection of anybody trying to shoot at you or.
No, well, yes, in one place, I don't know just where we were, but we were in kind of an open area, and all of a sudden there was some bullets flying at us across the way, and I was kind of out in front of my squad for some reason or other, and the squad leader hollered at me to get down. I says, "Well, I'm down." He said, "Stay down." I stayed down, and the bullets were flying above me, and there was a bank behind me, and I turned around and looked, and I could see the bullets flying into that bank.
Mm-hmm.
Well, something happened that stopped, and then we got up and started hiking across that field, and to get to some buildings that were over there. I don't know if it was a power plant or just what it was, but we got up there and there was nothing left around there. In fact, we were kind of firing from the hip on the way up there, but that's about all the firing I ever did.
All right. Now, did you see any German tanks?
At that time? No.
Okay.
They were so badly defeated before the Battle of the Bulge. That was their last stand, really.
Well, there were some areas where they were defending fairly heavily in the Ruhr pocket and places like that.
Well, like that place I just talked
Yeah.
about, they were shooting at us, but there was no tanks there at all.
Mhm. Okay. Now, did you have air cover or artillery support that you ever noticed, or?
We didn't need it. There was nobody bothering us any place.
All right. Now, as you were crossing Germany at this point before you get to Magdeburg, did you see much of the German civilians, or did they just stay undercover?
No, we saw quite a few civilians.
Okay.
Like I said, we captured a lot of prisoners that they sent to the back, and no guards with them.
Okay.
And the last day that we traveled on the highways there and got to Magdeburg, we had about 73 miles of road travel, which was quite remarkable in World War II.
Yeah. That's a lot to cover in one day. It means there's nobody shooting at you.
No.
Now, were you using the autobahns? Were you using the big
Well,
highways?
pretty good, nice highways, I recall, because we were riding on the tanks then. Because we couldn't go as fast as we couldn't hike as fast as the tanks could.
Okay. Well, why weren't you riding in your half-tracks?
Well, they were more of there wasn't much protection in there if you needed them. So they just had us ride on the tanks. That worked out pretty good.
Okay.
And as we were going along, after we got to where we were heading, to Magdeburg there, I talked to one of the tank drivers and I says, "Were you running out of gas on the way up here?" I says, "It sounded to me like I could hear you changing tanks." He said, "Yeah." And then they did fly up gas then to fuel for those tanks when we got to the Magdeburg. Because you don't get very good mileage with the tanks.
Right. And now, I guess we talked before the interview a little bit about the German prisoners and so forth. Did you get much of a look at them?
Well, they just all dressed the same and all, and you couldn't tell ages or anything like that. But they, of course, didn't have any arms. In fact, on one time on that drive, we captured a German officers' facility. There was quite a few of them in there, and they all surrendered. Threw all of their arms in a pile. You know, when we kind of liberated that pile, I ended up with a pair of German Lugers. They looked like they'd never been shot, but that ended up in my half-track after when I got shot, so I never did see him again.
Yeah. That happens.
That night of the 11th of April, that we, at least our group, company or whatever, slept on the floor of a railroad station on a marble floor. That was a beautiful place, but I think marble is harder than concrete. And then the next day, of course, was the activities when I got shot.
And describe then what happens then on April 12th for you. How does the day start out? What do you do?
We started out trying to make sure that that town was ours. And we got into an area where there were these big concrete sewer pipes, about various sizes, some of them 4 foot in diameter. And I was on a porch of a building across the ways, and I looked over to my right and I saw a German stand up and soldier, and he had a Panzerfaust. And he started aiming it at us. And, I hollered at the guys in the tank, and because they were behind me and off to my left. And they said, then all of a sudden, I don't know if he continued to stand up and was aiming over that way or not, but I went back over by the tank, and then the guy ducked. And then they told me to take cover. So I crawled inside one of them one of those pipes. Cause he says, we're going to fire this gun on our tank over there. So I crawled in there and I was smoking a cigarette, and I fired that tank, and I blew the cigarette right out of my mouth.
Well, was this a concrete pipe where
Yes.
but the opening was sort of horizontal or facing outwards, so like you're watching the action and the shell goes by?
Yeah, that's when I was laying on its side so that I could crawl into it. I was sitting in there taking cover. So then after that happened, we kind of lost contact with the people on our right, and we were starting to hike down there to get back to them, and I was, we kept quite a distance between each other, and the tanks were with us, and we stopped, and there was a big high board fence right next to me, and all of a sudden I got shot. And I thought it just went across my wrist because it didn't even hurt. Well, I found out later, then they opened up with that tank shooting through that fence. And I thought, well, how could I get shot through that fence? Because the bullet wouldn't get directed very good. And then when I found out I got shot through the wrist, I realized that he was in a building alongside that fence on the other side and shot down through there. It was a sniper up in there.
All right.
Whatever happened to him, I don't know, because when I got shot, they hired me to get down. I said, well, I'm down. I'm not going anyplace.
Mhm.
So then they eventually got things situated where they could get me out of there and back to the area where we had been with the tanks before. And eventually they got an ambulance down there for me and some other people and a couple of Germans. And they took a while to get there because they had to get a road map with a ton to see how they could get through all the roadblocks that they'd built up.
Mhm.
Then I was in various field hospitals, I think.
Well, had a medic come and bandaged you up, or?
I don't know just how that all took place.
Okay. Now, the injury itself, I mean, did it go between the bones, or did it break them, or?
Well, it's kind of, I got a bandage right here, but that's from something else. But I got, bullet went right through there. You can probably
Okay.
see that.
Yeah.
And it splattered some bones around in there a little bit. Screwed up the tendons in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a complete nerve injury. Well, when they just kind of took care of all of that, and I ended up with a big cast on it at that time, and it didn't have any medical attention to try to correct anything at that time
Right.
yet. And well, we got penicillin shots night and day, and that's a good
Okay. Now,
thing.
where did they wind up treating you? I mean, you're taken away to a.
well, I was in various hospitals, field hospitals, and I don't know just what all occurred there.
Mhm.
And then I ended up in a hospital in Cambridge, England. And I don't know if that was just a holding place too. And that's where that was an English hospital, and we ate there and
Mhm.
had good beds to sleep in, and they served us tea with our meals, and we started complaining about that, and they finally got them to switch to coffee.
Mhm.
And then we were out one time in Cambridge walking around, seeing the town, and stopped in a restaurant to eat. And I don't know what kind of meat we had, but I was trying to cut it. And with this hand of mine, I couldn't do anything with it. And
Mhm.
so the waitress come over and cut my meat for me. So we were in Cambridge, and then from there they sent us up to Glasgow, Scotland. We figured, and told we were going to be going home.
Mhm.
So we figured we'd be getting on a boat up there at Glasgow. And we got up there, and we were there a couple days, and we had bagpipes playing around there and stuff. And they finally told us we were going to fly out. One of the first ones of wounded to be flown back to the States.
Mhm.
And we eventually, we had to stop for refueling a couple of times, I think in Greenland and Iceland.
Do you remember what kind of plane you were in?
C-47 or something, I don't
Okay.
know.
Now, was it set up like a passenger plane or just a
No,
cargo plane?
It was more like you had to lay down in there because
Yeah.
we were all injured people.
Okay.
Then we landed at Mitchell Field in New York, and then transferred to another plane. I don't know what kind that was, and that flew us into Memphis, and then into the Kennedy General Hospital.
Is that where they would actually try to operate on you or correct the
That's
injury?
where I was treated. I was.
Okay. And how did that go?
That was a great place. Excuse me. This hospital was part of the Tennessee University or something that the Army took over, and we were in buildings, two-story buildings. It was nice setting there. And then got there in sometime in May, because after I'd been there a little while, I think I went home I was on a furlough. I think I was home for Memorial Day on that furlough.
Okay. Because I guess the timeline that your daughter put together is a little bit fuzzy. I mean, she has you in August in Memphis.
Well, in August is when they got to doing the surgery.
Okay.
And they, in order to find that live end for that nerve, they cut me from here way up to here, so I got a scar that long. But then there was a lot of physical therapy afterwards to get the tendons in your fingers working, and they never could get these two working, so I learned to adapt.
How long did they keep you there?
Well, I was in the hospital?
Yeah.
I was there till I got discharged. That
Okay.
was in March of
46. So you're there over 6 months, basically. More like 8 or 9. Yeah.
From the time I got shot to the time I got discharged was about 11 months.
Okay. Now, while you're there at the hospital, how are you spending your time? I mean, some of it's the therapy, but what else do you do?
Oh, we played golf, and kind of hard to play golf. Of course, you say your right hand just goes along for the ride anyway. And then some lieutenant would go out with us in his car, and one of the golf courses there on, I think it was just on Mondays, they'd let us play. And then they had bowling alleys there at the hospital, and I had to learn how to bowl left-handed because I originally I threw a ball right-handed all the time. So
Right.
that was kind of fun because you fall down because your feet would be out of whack. But I learned how to bowl left-handed there, and they had other things that we could get passes to go downtown Memphis and wander around down there and see the sights, and they took us to a football game one night. And that was, we were sitting so far away you could hardly see anybody. But
All right. Now, did you get to go home on leave during that time?
oh yeah, I was home quite a few times. I would never knew ahead of time really when I would be able to go, so it all seemed to be like I would leave on Friday night or something like that, and I'd have to go by train through Chicago. Seemed to me like I'd always end up home on Sunday morning, so when I got home Sunday morning it would be nobody'd be up yet, so I'd go and land at Davenport and sleep a while and surprise my folks.
All right. Now, do you remember hearing about the war coming to an end?
Oh yeah, when I was in the hospital there, and the war in Germany and Europe ended sometime in May,
It was in
6th
May.
of May, I believe.
Yeah, 6,
around
8,
there.
something like that, yeah.
And of course that was kind of a celebration there. And then in August the war ended in Japan, and that was a bigger celebration. In fact, that one nurse there was the first time we ever see her smile. But most of the nurses were very nice.
Okay. Now, when they finally discharged you in 1946, you get to go home. What did you do once you got home?
Well, I think probably I went to work with my dad painting again and stuff.
Would you have to Learned to paint left-handed?
Well, I painted left-handed anyway.
Okay.
But as that went on, see, that was in, I'm a little bit, yeah, I worked for my brother then too, of painting. And I decided that I didn't really like working up on a 12-inch board with nothing to hold on to but wet paint siding.
Mm-hmm.
So I got out of that, and I ended up then with some education. I decided that I wasn't really ready for college, so I went to a technical school in Pine Lake Veterans Vocational School, and I had a 9-month course there in drafting, architectural drafting.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a draftsman then. And then after I got out of there, and well, it was a 9-month course.
That's going to get you into probably 1947 by then. Or later, maybe even.
Yeah, well, wait a minute here now. Yeah, then I went to work in an architect's office as an apprentice on the job training there.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there. That was a 4-year program that I worked for them. That was one of the original oldest architectural offices in Grand Rapids at the time. It was Robinson, Campo, and Crow. They did the Civic Auditorium and pretty near all the hospitals in Grand Rapids. And a lot of work for Herpelsheimer's and Warsburgs when they were moving around downtown.
Right.
Then when my training was done there, I went to another architectural office, Davermans and Associates on Granville Avenue. I worked up there. I don't know how long I was there, but then I wasn't on a training program or anything.
Right.
I worked right in their office there, drafting. And it was around 2 years, I think, that I worked there. And then I went to work for a company that dealt with reinforcing steel for concrete and rods. And they had to be all bent up in different shapes. And I was a draftsman there and ended up there as their head estimator.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. And of course, I got married in there someplace. Got married in 1950. And so we have been married for 64 years.
Mm-hmm.
5 kids and 11 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren.
All right. Now, when you look back at the time you spent in the service, I mean, aside from what it did to your hand, how do you think that affected you? What did you learn from it?
That war was not a thing that you wanted to be involved in, of course, but it was a different experience than I'd ever had, and being such a young kid, why, you know, I was 19 years old when I got out.
Yeah. Now, while you were with your units, you have only really just a couple of months with them, pretty much, or maybe about 3 months with them or so before you were wounded. Did you make any very close connections with those guys, or were you?
Well, you were close to them, period, because you were all in the same
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Right.
I remember one town we were taking, and that was going door to door in buildings, and doorways were connected to each other, and just clearing the buildings, making sure there was nobody in there. And these 2 guys went through that door and started shooting at each other because they didn't know that there was somebody over there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys shot one of his best buddies right in it. I think he got him in the stomach. I don't know if he, never heard how he made out, whether he survived or not. But that was probably one of the worst experiences that we had there.
Okay. I guess, and when you were going through Germany, I mean, how much evidence did you see of sort of the Nazi side of things? I mean, was there a lot of physical stuff?
No, we saw much on the run. We didn't see much of that. we did. I think we released some people from, I think they were French soldiers from a prison camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they'd taken over that our artillery took over an airfield there too and blew up a bunch of airplanes over
Mm-hmm.
there. And I guess they even shot some down as they were trying to land. So that would be about the only kind of activity. But I didn't see any of that
Mm-hmm.
because that was part of a different part of our. When we traveled across Germany, we were in what they called combat battalions or whatever we call them
Well,
now.
combat commands,
Yeah,
where
combat commands.
you had artillery, infantry, tanks, and stuff kind
Yeah,
of
we
all
had
grouped together.
we were going down two different tracks
Mhm.
really. Because there's some, you take and move a whole division like that
Yeah.
and try to keep them together.
Yeah, if you put them on just one road, it would take a while.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then are there other things that kind of stand out in your mind about that time in the service or in Europe that you haven't brought into the story here yet?
Well, one of the things that I remember, we were sleeping out on the ground quite a bit, and throw a shelter half on the ground and crawl into your sleeping bags and shelter half over you, two guys together.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one night that happened. We woke up in the morning and it was snow on the ground. So sometimes we'd pull off the road, and I don't know where all of this occurred. It must have been up in the training in the Netherlands or something, but we'd kind of like out in a snowstorm or something, and pulled off into a wooded area and started building some fires to keep warm, and then all of a sudden we were getting all wet. Well, the snow was melting off the trees and falling down on us. And I think in that same area I don't know what we were doing in that town, but I remember walking over a dead cow that had gotten, I don't know how long it had been laying there, but it didn't smell very good.
Mm-hmm.
So
you saw enough of war to decide it was not a good thing.
No, and the people didn't really enjoy it either, the civilians, of
Mhm.
course.
All right. All right. Well, listen, I mean, I'd like to thank you for coming in and sharing the story today.
My privilege.
All right.
I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.